Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 2026, and today is National Take Your Dog to Work Day, which means it's the perfect time to discuss modern art, lost nuclear weapons, and bridge construction. My dog was not available for comment. But after digging through today's stories, I noticed that they all had something in common. Each one involved people attempting something that sounded impossible. A young artist trying to make a name for himself. Recovery teams searching for a lost hydrogen bomb in the Arctic. And engineers building what was, at the time, the longest suspension bridge span in the world. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone increasingly convinced that history is mostly people improvising with confidence. On June 24, 1901, a 19-year-old Pablo Picasso held his first major exhibition in Paris. Now that's only interesting because we know how the story ends. At the time, he wasn't Picasso. Not in the way we think of him today. He was simply another young artist trying to get noticed in one of the most competitive art scenes in the world. Paris was overflowing with painters, writers, musicians, and dreamers. Talent alone wasn't enough. You also needed luck, connections, timing, and an audience willing to pay attention. The exhibition showcased work from Picasso's Blue Period, a style characterized by cool tones and emotionally charged subjects. Many of the paintings reflected poverty, loneliness, and hardship, themes that had become deeply personal following the death of a close friend. What's fascinating is that nobody attending that exhibition knew that they were looking at one of the most influential artists in modern history. To them, he was simply a promising young painter. History has a habit of doing that. The future often arrives without introducing itself. Only later do we realize we were looking at the beginning of something important. Of course, some things are recognized as important immediately, especially when they involve nuclear weapons. On June 24, 1968, recovery efforts continued for a hydrogen bomb lost months earlier near Greenland, following the crash of a U.S. Air Force B-52 bomber. And yes, that's a sentence that sounds like it belongs in a thriller novel. In January of that year, a B-52 carrying nuclear weapons crashed near Thule Air Base in Greenland after an onboard fire. The crash scattered debris across ice-covered terrain in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Recovery teams faced brutal weather conditions, dangerous materials, and an enormous search area. The mission became one of the most complex cleanup and recovery operations of the Cold War. One thing I find remarkable is how much of the story sounds impossible. A strategic bomber, the Arctic, nuclear weapons, international political concerns, extreme weather. It's the kind of scenario that would probably be rejected from a screenplay for sounding unrealistic. Yet it actually happened. The incident also highlighted the extraordinary risks that existed during the Cold War. For decades, aircraft carrying nuclear weapons routinely flew patrol missions around the globe. Most people never thought about it. Most people never knew. But events like this revealed just how much was happening behind the scenes during one of the most tense periods in modern history. And after one story about a challenge hidden beneath Arctic ice, let's talk about a challenge that everybody could see. On June 24, 1981, the Humber Bridge opened in England. At the time, it held the record for the longest single-span suspension bridge in the world. Now, records are made to be broken. But what makes this story interesting is the sheer scale of the challenge. The Humber estuary is enormous. Connecting the two sides required engineers to think bigger than anyone had before. The bridge's main span stretches more than 4,600 feet. When construction began, the project seemed ambitious to the point of being unrealistic. Large engineering projects often attract skeptics. People question the cost, the feasibility, whether the effort is worth it. Yet once completed, the bridge immediately became both a practical transportation link and a landmark. One thing I appreciate about engineering stories is that they often represent optimism in physical form. Someone looks at a problem and decides, we can build our way through this. Sometimes they're right. The Humber Bridge stood as the world record holder for nearly 2 decades. A reminder that human beings occasionally decide the solution to a difficult problem is simply to build something enormous. And after spending today's episode around people who accomplished things others thought were impossible, it feels fitting to end with someone whose career took a few unexpected turns of its own. Born on June 24, 1947 in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, Peter Weller's best known for portraying RoboCop, one of the most iconic science fiction characters ever put on screen. And honestly, if his story ended there, that would already be a pretty successful career. But that's not where it ended. Weller continued acting, directing, and producing. Then he did something many people wouldn't expect from the actor behind a futuristic cyborg police officer. He became a respected academic. Weller earned advanced degrees in Renaissance art and history and eventually completed a doctorate in Italian Renaissance history. He has taught at the university level and hosted numerous historical documentaries. That's one of my favorite Wait, That's Random career paths. You start as RoboCop, you end up discussing Renaissance history. What I appreciate most is that Weller never seemed interested in being limited by one identity. Actor, director, historian, educator. His career demonstrates that people are often far more complicated than the role they're most famous for. And that's usually where the interesting stories are. And looking back across today's stories, I kept noticing how often remarkable achievements begin with someone refusing to accept limitations. A young artist trying to break into the Paris art world. Recovery teams tackling an almost unimaginable challenge in the Arctic. Engineers building a record-breaking bridge. And an actor who decided being RoboCop wasn't the only thing he wanted to be. Most ambitious projects sound unreasonable at first. That's probably why they're memorable. Anyway, that's what I ended up finding while working through June 24th. And before I go, here's today's oddly appropriate quote. People who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Often attributed to Steve Jobs. If you'd like to hear more of my work, audiobooks, or other projects I've somehow gotten myself involved in, you can find everything over at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and honestly, thank you for spending a little time being curious with me. I'll see you tomorrow.